outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Good evening and welcome to tonight's Late Show with me, Hannah Wilson. Unfortunately, Lucy is not very well today, so she is in bed recuperating. So you've just got me tonight. So wishing her lots of love and hoping that she feels better soon. I'm hoping the rest of you are hanging on in there this winter and not feeling too ill so far. For those of you on half term, I'm very, very jealous. For me, I've still got 2 more days to go and then I will be there on half term, which I'm very much looking forward to. But as you can tell, I'm also a little under the weather and slowly losing my voice. Mine's more that I breathe something in and because of my pulmonary embolism, it's affected my lungs. So forgive me if I'm talking a bit quickly tonight, but I can't project or talk as well as normal. So bear with me tonight and hoping that the rest of you are not getting to this point where just because the holidays are coming up, this is when you start getting ill and we start feeling a bit under the weather, just in time to have a rest and spend your week resting. So make sure that you are looking after yourselves on these last few days and not just putting school first and not yourself first. If you're ill, you're ill. You can't do it all. So you've got to look after yourselves. So tonight show is still in sponsorship with John Catt Educational. There's no me popping out behind the screen tonight, just you can see it all. You can go see all their educational books at johncattbookshop.com and use their discount code, so JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. And actually tonight's show is all about the power of teacher expectations. And this kind of stems from my show last Wednesday when I had Rachel McFarlane on talking about her book, The A to Z of Diversity and Inclusion. So this is one of the new John Catt series, The A to Z of, and there's lots of different series in the in there with different topics, and you can go back. There's already been a few shows on these different topics, so do go and have a look through the TTR archives and have a listen, because I do think it's the best way to know which books to go and get. And I thoroughly enjoyed Rachel's book, and actually that's kind of inspired tonight's show. So her for her book was Unconscious, and it talks about bias, and she's got a great quote by Rutger Bregman: "We can't help leaking expectations through our gaze, our body language and our voices." And I think it's such an interesting concept that our children that we teach react to our expectations, and that our level of expectations of our students can change how a student performs in our classes. So if you've got any experience of this or want to join in throughout the show, then do comment and I can put the comments up. And it'd be nice to have some interaction as I'm here on my own tonight. So do message in. But this kind of stems from, if those of you that have heard of it before, it's called the Pygmalion effect. So this was based on a idea and a study by Robert Rosenthal, a professor of psychology from the University of California. And in that study, he put pupils in California elementary schools sat an IQ test. Their scores were not disclosed and they were given to different teachers. And the names of around 20% of the cohort were told that these children could be predicted from the test scores as intellectual bloomers, when in fact Rosenthal had selected names at random. So they weren't actually intellectual bloomers, or HPAs in our case over here in England. And at the end of the study, they retook the IQ test, and actually the kids that teachers were told they had a high IQ had actually raised their IQ. So it's that idea that if we as staff think that higher of our students, then our students will raise themselves to those expectations. So it should be a good one. Hopefully some of this will resonate with you, and you'll be able to kind of maybe rethink about some of your tricky classes and the way that we treat them and look at it. Oh, we've had Dan tweet in. So he, as a trainee, we've been looking at this last week. It's very interesting. Yeah, so I just find this so fascinating, and it's something that I've always done with my classes. And to be fair, I got more into it the longer I was in teaching, because I've been into schools and I've taken progress 8 scores from -1 to +1 within a year, and people are like, how you do it, how do you do it? But I go in and I tell the kids, like, this is, I've never had kids on a minus, like, this is what we're going to get, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to do it as a team. Everyone's going to help everybody. We're all going to get there. It's a team effort. We all kind of wait our term. I'll help everybody, but I will give you the tools to succeed. And then thereafter, I was always like, one of my classes is always a grade higher than national average, and I expect nothing less than everybody else. If everyone else in the year before was capable, so are you. And I think just having that open conversation with the students as well, and being like, this is what I expect, this is where we're going, and they kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm getting in with this. We've got Michip. Boo, I'm mispronouncing that, Patricia. Great topic. Students often rise to the challenge when we remove the barriers. And I think it's that. And I've got myself thinking about this again, because I didn't teach any year 8 last year, and I've inherited all of year 9 this year. And I, having not taught them before, thought that it's, I got told a lot about them. Year 9 are quite a tricky year group, that we, as kind of a year, that obviously year 9s are normally quite tricky because they've got their options, they know what subjects they're dropping, kind of thing, so they start playing up and start like kind of not paying attention in the lessons they don't want to do or take further. And some of them teachers told me, like, oh, that tutor group, they're an awful tutor group, they're really hard to teach. And like, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get this group and they're going to be really hard and I'm going to really struggle. But actually, I kind of went in and I taught the first lesson, and at the end of the first lesson I went, I've heard a lot about you guys. And they're like, oh yeah, miss, what have you heard about us? And I was like, but do you know what? You've exceeded all my expectations, and you have been the best year 9 group that I've taught all week. And I've taught every group. Like, you're my favorite year 9 group that I've had all week. And they're like, oh my gosh, are you serious, miss? Like, is that true? And like, oh, can you email our tutor and tell him that, like, you thought we were the best? I was like, yeah, of course we will. Like, and they've been good as gold ever since. I do joke that, like, I'm like, oh, there's another tutor group that they're starting to creep up on you. They're doing really well at the moment, and I'm really enjoying teaching them because they're really like giving it a go. I was like, you guys need to watch out, or you've slipped down to number 2. You need to raise your game. And actually, these are the bottom sets, and it's kind of really interesting to see them kind of rise to the challenge and all give it a go. And actually, more kids in that class, when I throw out the risk and I'm like, right, you get to pick, what are you going to do? I want you to challenge yourself. I want you to try something you've not done before. These are the kids that are going well out of their comfort zone and trying stuff, and they quite often are all doing it, as opposed to the other groups, like 1 or 2 will be a bit risky and try something a bit different. But this group are kind of really rising to that expectation. So it made me think about it even more. We've got JBL. Thanks for listening in again. I used to set my first short essay assignment class expectations, and student would explain what they want from me and what they thought I wanted from them. Great insight. Oh, I do an amazing starter at the start of year 7, where at the very end of the first lesson, I tell them to turn to the back book, and I tell them that they've got 2 minutes to draw a house, and they all draw it. And then at the end of the 2 minutes, I'm like, right, I'm going to give you marks. And it's like, right, okay, you get 5 points for every window you've got. You get 10 points if you've got a garden. You've got an extra 5 bonus 10 points if you've got curtains on your windows, and you've got 10 points if you've got a chimney. And then I kind of flip it and like, but minus 20 if you've got steam coming out, smoke coming out of your chimney, minus 10 if you kind of have got a car in your garage, minus 50 if you've used a ruler. And then I'll like be like, oh, and if you drew it 3D, oh, you get a bonus 100 points. And they're like, oh, that's not fair, miss, that's not fair. And I was like, but what would made it fair? It's like, well, if I'd known what I had to do, then I would have done that. And I was like, exactly. So if we listen to our teachers in class and know what we're expecting of you, and you kind of follow those things, then generally you will hit the criteria and therefore get higher marks in class. And that suddenly that clicks in there. And then I use that every time. Like, if I'm like, these are my expectations, these are the minimum that I expect you to have in there to get the least amount of marks, and then these are the things that I expect you to add in to get you higher marks. And I think kind of doing it in a fun way, but actually makes them pause and think about, okay, maybe my teacher knows what they're talking about. And I think that's some of it as well, is having confidence in yourself and talking about things. So I'm not gonna lie, without Lucy here tonight, I have kind of replaced her with Copilot. So as Tom says, I quite often have a weird face when I'm trying to multitask anyway. I'm triple tasking today in terms of trying to remember all my facts and also do all the admin side of things, but we'll get there. So I just think I kind of went down a little bit of kind of a rabbit hole in terms of looking at the kind of things that happen behind all of this research and what it is and how we can use it. And I think it's that kind of thing of, not only are we raising expectations by going, oh yeah, this is, I expect you all to get this grade, I expect you all to get here, this is how we're going to do it, but also that we're kind of also not going, oh my god, I've got that group there, and we're all guilty of doing it. I know my previous school at like year 9 period 5 on a Friday, I used to joke that they gave me my pulmonary embolism because that's when it started, was their lesson, period 5 on a Friday. I was like, it's their fault, they're so difficult, that's what happened. And I'm like, no, actually I kind of didn't have the right expectations of them, and actually the lesson was never as bad as I thought it would be. But actually, kind of, if I'd kind of went into those lessons having higher expectations at the start, would the lessons have been more positive as a whole? And I think we need to think about that. Like, even if you had that difficult group, thinking about how you can address that group, how you can go into that with a positive mindset, how you can kind of set that group up to succeed and mentally go into it in a positive way is something that we can all kind of use in our arsenal. Because quite often it's always like everyone's had that class that they've struggled with behavior wise, everybody's had that class, but actually this is something that we can all add into our teaching craft to help build them. But yeah, so the Pygmalion effect is also known as the Rosenhall effect. It's a psychological phenomenon where high expectations lead to improved performance, and the concept is obviously very popular within kind of education. But originally, which I found really interesting, I didn't know this, it came from Greek mythology and was popularized in 1968 by The Study. But before that, it was kind of, it was known to do with the fact that we have these expectations, the mythological kind of, we think that they can help us, and like if we believe in those things. But students, the whole point of it was that it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy that if we have that teacher expectation, then they will follow that. And I think we do have that in some bit in the fact that we have teacher expectations in terms of behavior. We have these expectations of how students should be, that they should be polite and well-mannered and prepared. And I think, so we have a lot of this already within our teaching in terms of how we do that. But teachers might give more attention, give more encouragement, give more feedback, and just be more specific. And I think we've all seen that as well. Like the naughty kids, if you give them a bit more praise and a bit of positivity, are they actually going to do better? I know, for example, there's a kid in my school who's really, really struggling, and actually he just thinks all the teachers hate him. He thinks that he never gets any praise, never positivity. And it's like, actually, we flip it and it's like, I know you're capable of this. I know you can do this. And it's thinking about maybe those positive teacher behaviors that we can do to help them. But also it's that student self-perception. So students internalize their teachers' expectations, which affects their self-esteem and motivation. So if they think they can never succeed, they think they're only going to ever get negatives in your lesson, they are going to be that self-fulfilling prophecy. If we go, oh my gosh, that group's going to be awful, period 5 on a Friday, they're going to be horrific, they are going to be that kind of prophecy. We need to be consistent and be thinking, as if reading my mind. High expectations must be consistent. Do you think low expectations are a reflection of staff morale, culture, or expertise? And I do think that. I think it can go through a staff if you all know that, oh my god, that group, oh my gosh, that group is horrible to teach. And that you can go, if I could have very much gone into that mindset with my year 9 group going, oh my god, this group is going to be really tough and really hard. it's going to be a long slog this year because I've heard about them, and year 9 is always the hard year. Actually, I made myself go, no, these kids are getting a fresh start. And sometimes starting the year like that, of going, right, I've never taught you, or this is a new year, you're a new group, you're slightly mixed up, this is new expectation. I think especially going from year 9 to year 10, I definitely do that with year 10. Like, this is a reset. You are not the same kids. You are not, this is not the same subject as what you've done in Key Stage 3. This is a new level, and you are going to raise yourself to this level, and this is kind of where it is. And I think staff morale is obviously a thing. And I think there's certain times of the year as well where you get more tired and it's harder to have those high expectations or have that energy. I think you definitely need a bit of energy to be able to do this properly and kind of breathe that into your lessons. But we have a great kind of SLT member who's in charge of our year 11s, and he's always like, you need to be present in the lessons and listening to what your teachers say. What your teachers say is gold. That's gold, what they say. And I love that. Like, actually, we do know what we're doing. And I think that's some of it as well, is having confidence in ourselves that I know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm doing in my lessons. And if you listen and pay attention, then you can do well. If you mess around and don't listen, then that's your own prerogative. But honestly, I kind of been doing this a while. I kind of know what I'm talking about. And I think that the other one they said, but obviously student performance obviously changes. The change in students' self-perception and motivation lead to changes in the academic performance. And I think although this is kind of looking at the Pygmalion effect, there's also a lot of growth mindset. And for me, learning about growth mindset was a massive thing in terms of changing how I've taught. And I'm going to come onto that a bit later in the show. So although Pygmalion is often discussed in terms of positive expectations, negative expectations can also have a significant impact. So, and students will perform poorly. Like, if there's that kind of thing of, if you go, oh God, that kid's never going to pass. Like, what am I going to do with them? They're never, what's the point? And I think they will feed off on that and they will know. But actually, there's also the caveat of this is if when you've got good results always, people might think that your subject is easy, or that if they can put all of the lowest attaining students in your class and that you will have that effect on them. But actually it does, because I've had my I've changed schools, so my results weren't my school results this year, but the year before, my results, I had the highest Progress 8 school in the school. The next closest department to me was maths, and they were 0.6 behind me in Progress 8. But looking at the data, there was only one class that had the same prior attaining data as mine. So I had the lowest attaining students in the whole school, and the other subject that had the same students and the same prior attaining data, those students got minus 1 point something. So I'm like, those same kids performed well in my subject, but performed low in another subject, which shows that the prior attaining data doesn't really affect how you can get those kids to perform. It's all about expectations and routine and building in the skills to be able to get them to achieve. And I think it's a bit of that. You have to kind of scaffold it and help them get up there, and then reduce it. Once you've got to build up their confidence and make them feel like they can do anything, and then you can kind of slowly reduce it out, and then they realize that they can do it all by themselves. They don't need you holding your hand, they can do it. And I think so kind of the practical applications of the Pygmalion event is that setting high expectations, communicate high expectations to all students, regardless of their past performance. So you've got to say, like, you can do this. It doesn't matter how you're done in other things or how well you've done in the past. Like, this is a fresh start. You can do it. And you've got to have those expectations of yourself to be able to do it. Provide support and encouragement to offer consistent support and positive reinforcement. So that kind of, I've never had it as much as I've had this year, but obviously I've moved schools, so I haven't always taught these kids. But I've had kind of a lot of kids going, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't draw, I can't draw. And I was like, I forgot how my language changed in my previous school. So I'd been there 7 years, but I very much, the second they walked into my classroom in year 7, I went, we do not say I cannot draw. Okay, because drawing takes practice. Nobody draws perfect the very first time they draw. It takes hours. And quite often I normally have there's a drawing that I do of an eye with my year 10s that takes about 2 hours, and it's hyper realistic, but I'm like, that, guess how many? And they're like, oh, maybe like half an hour. I was like, no, that took me 2 hours to draw that one tiny little A4 drawing. And I do this like all the time. It is not a quick process, it's a patient process. And the thing is, unless you give something a go and take a risk and try something, you're never going to know kind of what you can do. If you give up before you've tried, how will you know if you can draw or not? You're just giving up the first time that you're drawing. And again, like when I go into year 10 and I'm doing those longer drawings, a lot of the kids are like, oh, it looks rubbish, I can't do it, doesn't look right, it doesn't look right. I'm like, trust the process, like draw along with me and trust the process. But because we're in a society now where instant kind of gratification is there, like instant results on phones and scrolling, they want that dopamine hit of it going right. But for them to be like, this looks wrong, I was like, it will look wrong until it's finished. It will look wrong. You've got to go through it. Keep going. It's all about layers, and we're going to rub out the layers, and then we're going to build the layers, and we're going to work back into it. It's going to take time. It is not a quick process. But the mental kind of battle it takes them on those first few lessons to kind of actually concentrate and draw for 2 hours and kind of trust the process without it being instantly good is really difficult for them. And I think that's something that like we can build into our kids in terms of how they're doing things. Dan's commented again, creating a learning environment where getting things wrong isn't feared. And it's exactly that. Like a lot of kids are like, they just fear that they're going to get told off if they get it wrong. Or I'm very much my school at the moment, I'm trying to build that and change it. They'd rather not write anything and get it wrong than write something and be marked wrong. And I'm very much, because I teach food as well, and they've got longer essay questions on there. They won't write anything. They're like, oh, no, I was like, you know it, you can do it. I'd rather you write something, and I'm building them up. And I'm like, actually, the kids that are just now writing something are suddenly going up a grade or 2 on their predictions because they're giving it a go, and they can actually get 1 or 2 marks from that. And then there's only a couple of marks between grade boundaries. And I think it's that as well, explaining them so they understand the process. If you can understand why you've got to do these things, then it works really well in terms of getting them to where they need to be, understanding that you are going to get things wrong, but actually that growth mindset of, if you learn where things are going wrong, then you know which bits you know right, you know which bits you don't, you know which bits you need to focus on when you study next time, and kind of building that up. And there's a bit in the and if anybody's read the high performance books, there's a bit in there where they talk about from the podcast, I think it's Jess Ennis Hill or somebody, or maybe it was Kelly Holmes, somebody kind of failing X number of races. There's one of the SAS guys who froze on his first kind of deployment, and there was, I think it was Chris Hoy, it might have been another one that failed a certain number of times before he started succeeding. And I think we quite often just see the success. We see the outcome at the end in society. We don't necessarily think about the whole, everything that's gone through to get them to that point. So we have to think about how we kind of reiterate that to students, because they haven't got that resilience yet. They don't realize you have to fail and get up and go again. You have to fail, you have to get up and go again. And part of me feels like, quite often it's like those kids at the start that kind of are quite often a little bit naughty and cheeky and stuff, and then turn it around and do all right. They're the ones that go off and succeed in life. And I feel like that's because they've built that resilience. They've learned that actually life isn't simple, life isn't easy, and actually it takes a little bit more hard work to kind of get through it and get going. And actually we need to learn from those mistakes, and it's okay. Life gets hard. Life will always get hard for everybody at some point in different ways, and it's how you react to it and how do you do that. So this is quite a nice way as well to kind of, it's a life skill, isn't it, building your growth mindset and your resilience. But obviously, part of the Pygmalion effect is obviously be mindful of your bias. So reflect on and address any unconscious bias that might affect expectations and interactions with students. I find this quite interesting because I don't think I've got bias, but I probably do. I think I've spoken about it on one of my previous shows. There's a Netflix series where they had a jury, and the different people were given the same evidence. So basically this a really good looking white guy did a burglary, and then a black guy did the same burglary, and then an old kind of unclean guy did this. And it was based on what the jury saw, and based on what they saw they gave different sentences. and it's unconscious, so they didn't realize that they were sentencing them on based on their looks, but essentially it was, when you kind of go into it a bit deeper. And it's like, do we do that with our children? Are you kind of more lenient with the kids that are really polite, or are you do you actually, the ones that are really nice and polite, you actually forget about because actually you think they're fine and they're all right, but actually is it that they're just keeping it inside and not saying anything? And same with HBAs. Are you making sure you're checking and pushing and challenging them enough, or are they just kind of like skating through and doing everything that's asked and being all nice? Have you got a kid that just rubs you up the wrong way because they call you bruv? I've got one at the moment that's like, if I tell them like, your shirt's untucked, all right, bruv. It's like, no. But is that my tolerance, my bias, or is it that actually, no, they're not reaching my expectations, I need to make sure I enforce that? But is it that kind of thing? Do you think that you are treating students differently? I know I certainly, like, if a kid has a difficult home life, I'm more tolerant of them, but is that okay to be more tolerant of them? I don't know. Or is it, if there's certain kids that are really struggling but they're always really polite, I will always have the time to kind of put in the scaffolding and help them and support them, whereas the kid that's rude to me, I might not kind of help them as much, because I know if I go and help them, they're not necessarily going to take it on board. But actually, it's about building those relationships and building those expectations that all the kids should be up to that level. But mindful bias, I think, especially when we're tired, that bias can become a bit more present, certainly at the end of a half term like this. But yeah, so I think it's just about maintaining that and thinking about kind of our practice and our craft. And so, so JBL's also put, like, it's like good writing, you conceal all the rough drafts. So I just think, like, there's no one's going to do the perfect writing the first time. It's all about practice and kind of reiteration and building those skills. So from there's different environments, like I talked about, like, is it just in teaching that this is kind of evidence? But actually it's not, and quite often it happens in business environments, like a sales team. If a manager is really positive and builds it up, I believe you can do it. And I think almost the business environment almost transfers to like a head of year role. I feel like if you could do the Pygmalion effect as a head of year, you could have a very positive impact on a year group. Like if you're like, oh no, we're going to do the best year group, we're going to beat all the other year groups, we're going to get the most house points, we're going to win the sports day, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And actually, like, maybe the head of year or head of house, you could really build your group up. And I know I was very much like this on last sports day, where I was like, come on, we're going to win. And literally for weeks beforehand, everyone's like, what house are you in? I'm like, I'm in this house. And they're like, oh, unfortunate. And literally it was known to everybody that my house was not very good on sports day. We were ahead on leaderboards on everything else, but not sports day. And every time everyone was like, what house? I'm like, this house, we're gonna do really well. And they're like, no miss, you're not. But I still went out on that sports day and I cheered like we were going to win everything. I was like whooping, clapping, cheering even when we were like, there's even dodgeball and everything on our sports day. Even when our team was like really getting pelted, I'm like, come on. And I just like, and I think as a teacher, me getting that involved and that excited and overly excited and overly competitive, even though I knew we had zero chance of winning sports day, or maybe 10%, maybe, like, I'll be optimistic, raising my expectations. Even though I knew there was a very slim chance of winning, I was so kind of going for it and cheering for it. And it got to the point where we had the best banners, like the kids came and made banners. So I was like, no, we're going to do it. We're going to go full force, even though we're going to go full force for everything. And we had, when we were doing the relays, everyone was standing up and screaming, and we actually like won one of the relays, and it was like we'd won the whole entire sports day, us winning that one relay. And it was just so exciting, and it was almost infectious that the kids kind of picked up on it and raised it. And it's like, I just don't think we should give up, even though if we know like a house isn't the best house, or if a year group isn't the best year group, that there's always that thing like, oh, that year group, oh, they're the worst year group we've had. We haven't had a year group like that for a while. But actually, kind of, it doesn't kind of affect you in that it has that negative effect. It will feed through to them if that's how you feel about that group, or year group. It can be that big. It doesn't have to just be a class. It could be a whole year group that you have that effect. As JBL said, I stopped giving detentions for a week, and 14 years later, I still didn't give detentions. I never expected that to happen. So, yeah. So my old school, I kind of stopped giving as many detentions, and I just actually felt like that they actually benefited it. And actually, some of the kids that I should have been giving detentions would actually hang out with me at lunch and come back, and it kind of had the reverse effect that they wanted to come and hang out with me. So it can have that effect as well. But yeah, so obviously there's lots in terms of vocabulary development as well, and that fact that like you can kind of challenge kids to raise their expectations, raise their vocabulary, raise things like that, and kind of that kind of impact can have, and that it's been used in that effect as well. I'm not an English teacher, so I don't know how much that can have an effect, but I think it does. But I think also it is that navigating of the low expectations, so flipping it and making yourself aware of the kind of the negative, but fostering the positive. So we should reflect on our own bias and make sure we're thinking about those and how we can change that towards a student. So maybe you've had a really bad year with a student, or bad half term with a student. Think, stop, pause, reflect. It's half term. Be like, right, I'm going to change my bias towards that student. I'm not going to kind of think, oh God, here comes that student. My lesson's going to be derailed if that student's in the class. Oh my gosh, that student's going to be here. That's going to be a really difficult lesson now. And actually flip my kind of awareness that I'm doing that and talking to myself in my head, that kid is not kind of going to disrupt my lesson. I'm going to raise my expectations and expect them to actually have a really great lesson, and set myself off in that. And again, communicate that high expectations. And I will quite often be, there's like a certain student like, right, we're going to have a good lesson today, aren't we? And actually name them and be like, I'm expecting you to do really well, and we're all going to get my house point for today, or my commendation for today. And I really expect, or if they once they start, maybe be like, oh, you're looking well on track for my house point or a commendation for this lesson, and kind of use it and lure it in a positive way. Like show them that they are raising themselves to your standards and that they can do that. Quite often critical thinking and problem solving can help with those kind of challenges in terms of high expectations, because quite often I love a bit of oracy and kind of debating something where there isn't anything a wrong answer, and like it can build and really create, and then they can get really enthusiastic about it. And actually the more enthusiasm you can get, the more it helps to raise expectations as well. But obviously also that positive reinforcement, like I said, like, oh my gosh, that's going really well. Oh, we're definitely on track for a house point. Oh, I think that's looking like my best one today. And actually kind of, because quite often we as teachers can easily go over to the kind of kids that we know are going to have written something really well and read out their example, or put their book under the visualizer as an example. But take the kids that don't expect you to ever pick their book and use theirs, or maybe like give them a little bit of a hand, make sure you check, and then like, right, or tell them, today I want it to be your book that I'm going to read out as an example. Because seeing their faces when you actually do is really exciting. So kind of that positive reiteration, but also that in thinking about ways that we can do it to make sure that they're included in our classroom. And obviously that growth mindset, so making sure that we can all do this, and if a kid, I'm quite often like, if a kid goes, I can't do this, I'm like, can't do it yet, let's work out how to do it now. And that kind of really supportive, kind of positive language and positive learning environment. So being inclusive in your practice and making sure you've got differentiation, especially with mixed groups. Don't stereotype your groups, because actually this is the first time I've been at a school that have got setted groups. Normally I have mixed ability, and I love mixed ability art, because I can put my high and my low ability together and they create beautiful things, because it's just, and also my high ability in art isn't necessarily my high ability in other subjects, and I find that the power dynamic has changed in those lessons, and I find it interesting. So actually in my lessons, my lower ability groups are actually flying far higher than my high ability groups. My high ability groups are really struggling with that critical thinking, that decision making, and that risk taking, because they're just so used to doing everything they're told and being successful at it. It's the ones that are used to kind of powering through, and the lower ability are actually kind of really aren't afraid. When I go, right, I'm going to challenge you, you're going to do this, they're like, yeah, how high? Where do you want me to go? What do I do? Where do I find? And they're so much more independent, which is I find quite interesting. I don't know whether anybody else does, but I find I've never taught those kind of dynamics before. And actually, I don't know whether it's just because that's where my subject goes. Then maybe there's more neurodiversity down the bottom end because maybe they've struggled with examinations and they've just ended up down there. And actually, the creative environment is somewhere their brain kind of thrives. I don't know, but I'd love to delve more into that. There's a PhD project for me in a few years' time. But I just think that's including your mixability and not lowering their expectations just because they're down the bottom. It doesn't need to be that. Don't stereotype them. Make sure you're still setting those high expectations for them all, and making sure your assessment criteria is clear and accessible. So, like I said about the kind of the house, if they don't know what they've got to do to get there, they're never going to get there. They're always going to fail. So we're setting them up for failure if we're not telling them what we want them to learn and what we want them to exceed in. I always joke with my GCSE groups. I'm like, I'm giving you the cheat codes. I'm showing you how to work smarter, not harder. Like, if you listen to me, you don't have to do as much work, but the work you do will be exactly what you need to do to get the grades. I'm like, I've been doing this for years. All my students have always overachieved, well over a grade above national average. I was like, I'm a moderator. I know exactly what examiners are looking for. Like, this is where I tell you where to focus, how to do it, and giving them those cheat codes. They're not like, I'm not telling them what to do, but I'm explaining why we do it the way we do it and why that's going to get them more marks and things like that. I mean, every art teacher is going to agree with me on this one. Kids love decorating and painting their pages. And I'm like, they don't need collage backgrounds and painted backgrounds and paint splattered backgrounds, because it messes the page up to the point where when you're then sticking your work on top, it detracts from the beauty of the thing that you've just drawn. Okay, so, and plus, in the time it's taking you to paint and decorate your background, you could have done another drawing that would have got you more marks. So why would you bother painting a background just to decorate a page for it to detract from your work, and you're wasting that time when you could be getting extra marks? So it's making them really think about, be conscious of their actions and their time, what they're doing and how they're doing it and how well they're doing it. And I think that's why I'm quite clear with my communication. And the same with like quite another common misconception in art. A lot of them will go and find facts off the internet about the artist. They'll find where they were born, how many children they have, what university they went to. I was like, how does that influence their art and what you're about to do? It doesn't. I was like, so why have you added it? Why do you know it? So I kind of lead them. I find them really good articles on the first few artists, and we go through and highlight them and interact with them and understand the context of the art. So it's not just looking, oh, like that. So I want them to really understand what is going on in society, what is going on in that artist's life that is making them make art like this. What's the point otherwise? And then how that would then influence their own craft, but then use it to analyze their own work. So like generally when they write about it, it's like you're deconstructing the artwork, you're writing about the formal elements and how it was made, and the use of line and color and tone. Like, how are they different from any other artist? What makes it that type of art? And I think it's that kind of really delving deep and going, rather than being like, yeah, that's pretty, or like, oh, they yeah, and just copying stuff off the internet. And really, we are in a society where everything is at our fingertips. These kids can Google anything, but they don't know how to interact with that information, how to dig it apart and take it apart and use it and put it into context. And I think that is something, a skill that the kids will then be able to take on to later in life, depending on what job they do. That's going to be a really good, important presentation skill for them as well. Like really thinking about how they're using that information. And so I've taught them that skill. So now all my students know how to appropriately look for information, how to then use that and write about it and interact with it. So it's not a separate entity. And it's kind of thinking about that. Oh, Dan's messaging. What are we on? Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. Different students have different strengths. It's up to us as teachers to support improvement in those areas that still need improving. Yes, I completely agree. So my unpopular opinion here is, because I know that they used to have the learning styles, and then that was thrown out, that doesn't exist. And you even used to be like reading through text or pictures or videos or doing. And I'm definitely one of those, like, if you gave me a piece of text and told me to read through it, I would really struggle to remember it. If you kind of played me a video, I could probably remember some of it, or if I heard it, I can remember some of it. But if you had me physically do it, I remember everything, and I could then tell the next person exactly how to do it. And I think it's that kind of thing that actually our students do all learn and take information in different ways. Granted, we know that it's not as, they don't fit in a bucket like they used to, but actually we need to build the skills in, and that's one of the cross-curricular links as well. If you can build them good skills like that, so I've taught my art students how to research and interact and react to that. That's going to be transferable to history, to English. There's so many different things, like giving their opinion and justifying it and explaining why they like that or why they don't, and how that's going to influence them. They're really good critical analysis points that could go across into lots of other subjects. So if it's done well, it can kind of go across all those different things. So improving those skills and having those skills. And I don't expect any of them not to be able to write like that. I don't expect any of them not to be able to analyze like that. That is just a thing in my classroom. And the other one I said is obviously a good, strong relationship. And I think that's it. Sometimes we're this authoritative figure, and it's hard to build those relationships if you are constantly talking down to kids and telling them off. And there's a difference between expectations and kind of having that kind of authority of you must do this. And I think sometimes just explaining why they should do it and making them understand why that is important for them to do, why it's the same for everybody, why we do it that way, so that everyone else in the classroom can learn that is why we do this way. And also kind of letting them know about you and letting that you kind of be this human. Like I always tell my kids after open evening, all right, all the teachers are gonna be so tired from school today. I'm like, be good as gold. Don't put a step wrong, because your teachers will be tired and you will get attention quicker than any other day of the year, the day after open evening. But you just have to, they are human and they're going to make mistakes, and today is the day. So be compassionate and kind to your teachers today. Or like if my son's been ill, I'm like, oh, I've been up all night, like I've not slept this week, I really need your help. Or like, for example, me, I'm like, I'm losing my voice, I'm not doing great, we need to be quiet as quickly as we can on these days. Or I'm going to tell one kid, like, right, I'm going to give you a nudge, you're going to then shush the rest of the class for me. And it kind of works, and they kind of on side, they can be your team. Like they need to be your team, as opposed to you kind of being, you want to be a coach to them and guide them, as opposed to being this dictator at the top. You want that kind of nice student teacher relationship, and that student voice where they feel that they can express their thoughts, they can express that, make it a safe space that they can express their worries, that they can say what they can't do. And then also you'll lose this whole, oh, I don't understand, that kind of like, what don't you understand about it? What part is it? And I think that is also really important language in terms of expectations. If they just think that they can go, I don't understand, and then they don't have to do it, then that is gonna kind of trickle into those lessons and get bigger and repeat. So it's thinking about things like that in terms of kind of how the student interacts, and thinking about those, like, no, right, which you need to explain exactly where it is, or then break it down. Do you understand this bit? Do you understand this bit? Do you understand this bit? Where am I? Which point do we lose you at? And really understanding and making them feel heard. Because if you are just kind of like, well, I've already told you 3 times, which I am very guilty of. I will do that very tired on a Friday afternoon. I've already said this 3 times. What do you mean you still don't understand? But actually being like, okay, which bit don't you understand? And I'm not afraid to, if I've got a PowerPoint up and a kid says they don't understand something, I'm like, right, I will take that down. I will add to it, and I will type on it in the lesson, live, changing stuff. And I think we have this expectation as teachers that everything has to be perfect from day dot, that you can't kind of change direction in a lesson, but actually the best lessons and the best teachers will adapt and change and pivot in a lesson, and be open and honest, and like, right, okay, anybody else not understand this, or can anybody else explain it better than what I have? Sometimes the best students learn best when they are teaching others. But actually just adding into those PowerPoints is more acceptable in the lesson. Don't like be like, well, it's already there. Like, what else can I add to it? I've even been known to, I'm an art teacher, I can go around, I can take pictures of kids' work that are doing it, and then I will quickly add them. I mean, for me, that's a 2-minute job, because I'm a bit of a techie, but I can pop those pictures up. I'm like, right, can everybody see that? Or pop a book under, take a book of a kid that is doing well, pop it under the visualizer. Does this explain, do you understand it now? Does it explain it better now that you've seen visually what it looks like and it matches the kind of descriptions on the board? And then like, don't be afraid to be like, right, I didn't put enough scaffolding into this. How do I kind of help them? Or even yourself, pop yourself under the visualizer and you do the work along with them. If you haven't got that, don't be afraid of building that relationship. Like, right, we'll do this as a team. We'll all do this. Right, let's all do this together, and then you can have another go. So I think that kind of thing is really important in terms of getting it right. But I'm just going to have another great big thank you to John Catt. And obviously, if this is ticking your box, then there's this great chapter, like I said, in the A to Z of diversity and inclusion. But there's lots of other books that kind of discuss this over on John Catt as well. So you can kind of go and check them out and find out a bit more about them and check out their video.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. John Catt have an exceptional collection of book titles that cover a range of educational topics, ideas and research. The books are aimed at forward-thinking schools and support best practice teaching for both primary and secondary education. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order.
So go and check them out, and you can find lots of lovely books talking about that over on John Catt. Because that's the thing, I love a bit of educational research. I love going down that rabbit hole of kind of finding all different things of educational. But this one is one that I do love, and I feel like it's possibly one of those that are maybe slipped away as well over kind of the last COVID. I'm going to say COVID. I'm throwing it out there. I say COVID every week. But I do think it's like one of those that actually we can have these high expectations, or it's like, oh, well, it's because of COVID that they now can't do this, or they can't reach our expectations. We need to adapt our expectations. But students can still get there. It's fine. We'll get them there. So I've also I'm going to flip the switch a little bit because I thought, I was like, what else could this be used for? And actually, I thought, how can schools involve parents and the community in addressing low expectations? Because actually, that is can be quite a difficult one, or we kind of like, a community can have low expectations of a school or students, or we can have low expectations of parents, or parents can have low expectations of school. And it's that kind of relationship, and thinking about how that could work also. So obviously, like, the first thing is building strong relationships. So regular communication, establishing open lines of communication, newsletters, emails, parent-teacher meetings. So, but I think a lot of it is like making sure that parents feel up to date and know where things are and know who to communicate with the right things, because quite often things get sent to the wrong people and then they don't reply, or they don't get forwarded on, or we're all majorly busy. If you don't have a PPA on one day, then you're not getting back to that. But I think it's having, and I when I did my do my level 7 apprenticeship, I remember we had a lecture once where they talked about like kind of the structure. And actually, the most important person of your school is probably your receptionist. If you have a good receptionist, then your community and your parents, they're the first person they come across. They're going to have a high expectation of your school because they're the person that greets them. And if you flip that, if you think about Amazon, if you have a really awful Amazon delivery, or other delivery providers are available, but if they leave the box somewhere, it gets wet or gets smashed, and they do a bad job every time, you don't automatically go, oh, what a bad delivery driver. You go, oh my God, Amazon, they're awful. That Amazon, they never deliver properly. They never do this. They never do that. And like, you may never even like meet the people high up and the managers and the bosses in Amazon, but we automatically kind of associate them with the people at the bottom who are delivering it. And it's kind of that expectation that actually, if you have bad receptionists that are kind of greeting people in the school negative, don't answer the phone politely and things like that, that can kind of have a negative impact on your school and the school relationship. So it's kind of thinking about those things as well. So creating a inclusive school culture. So providing training for teachers and staff on cultural competence and implicit bias. So I think it's one of those that actually it's not one of those that's often talked about or often taught in CPD. There's often lots of other more important things, but actually how we, and again, it goes back to that, like how we email parents and how we address them. Like I went through a stage in my teaching career where I think it was probably after I had my son and was very tired, and I would forget to put hello, and I would just reply to emails and just answer their questions. And this would go to staff and all sorts, like actually pausing and going, hello, how are you? And if I'm emailing people, oh, hi, hope you had a great weekend, or hello, I hope you had a lovely half term, how are you? Can you do this for me? That's going to get you way further, and it's going to create a different kind of culture and expectations. So thinking about that, and when we reply and thinking about how we do that can just create a more positive atmosphere, and raising those expectations that's how we reply to people. We're not rude, we're not blunt, we are all people, and we need to think about how we talk to people. And then obviously engaging parents in the learning. I mean, another great John Catt book, if you need another recommendation, I had Tom Sherrington on back in, I want to say September. That feels last year. Maybe it wasn't. No, it was January. I had him in January. Just felt like a year ago. I had him in January, talking about his new book, engaging parents and students in their revision and study and stuff. And that was he was, again, if you want to go back and listen to the show, he talks slightly about the book, but we ended up diverting onto the topic of talking about kind of how to get parent engagement. And he used to do kind of sessions where the parents would come in and he would explain how to study and how to teach them how to revise and how to build, how to do critical thinking, how to do, and the book has all those different things in it. And I find that really interesting, like teaching parents how to teach their kids and get them engaged in the learning. Like, do you know what good revision is? Can you tell if your child is revising or they're literally just kind of listening to music and got a book open in front of them? Like, how can you engage and question your child to help them with their learning and revision? I think is a really interesting one. And if it's done well, again, that's is how many people can you get to board the ship and keep it afloat? Like, that's an extra pair of hands, an extra kind of dynamic that's going to be supporting those children and helping them learn properly. So definitely kind of engaging them. I definitely think like partnering with local community businesses, non-for-profits and things like that, building resources for students, making them think about kind of maybe even like from a careers point of view, kind of jobs and experience in the wider community, making them part of it as well, like raising those expectations that these are the kind of jobs and things that are available to you in your community. This is what you can do. This is what you're capable of. And look at where you could end up. And then a great one is alumni as well, getting them to come back and talk about the things that the success that they've achieved, and they were sat in the same place that you were. That's another one for kind of raising those expectations and kind of thinking about that. And obviously this one might be a bit controversial, but empowering parents. So having parent groups or having advisory councils or committee kind of things where they can get involved. They can be involved in kind of maybe more interactive groups where they have their say about the school. They feel like their feedback is heard. Or feedback from a parent survey is kind of spoken to them about. So it's kind of really actually feeling like they're listened to and engaged and have a say in the way their child's school is run. And I think that's kind of really important. So finally, I'm going to move on to growth mindset. And kind of where that kind of sits in all this, because I think actually it's kind of it comes hand in hand with high expectations, is actually kind of defeating the negative mindset that goes along with them. So for me, I was introduced to growth mindset, 10 years ago or so, and I've read books on growth mindset. There's, again, pop over to John Catt. We've got you all covered today, and go. You use the discount code JCTTR2425 for 20% off. So if you're into this and you're finding it really interesting, then do go check that out. But it was the assistant head at the time, John Vincent, who at my school was teaching me about growth mindset, and I'd never really heard of it before. And he used to work for Norwich City football team, and he said that like he worked as a psychologist with them, and that when the team came out, they had to come out in all their kit properly. They had to have their socks pulled up. They weren't allowed to come out looking sloppy. And it's that mindset that you kind of present yourself in the best way, and that you are really positive and ready to learn and ready to develop. And I think that's kind of a really interesting kind of take on it, that no matter what age you are, we all have to present ourselves as best as we can. But the growth mindset term is coined by psychologist Carol Dweck, is the belief that abilities and intelligence can be developed through effort, learning, and perseverance. People with a growth mindset see challenges as opportunities to grow and more resilient in the face of setbacks. So it's just having that positive belief that you can do it. But I think it's also that, like, right, not seeing setbacks as this really negative that you're then not going to be able to do it, that you're actually kind of seeing it as that kind of positive next steps of, right, I'm going to learn and I'm going to grow. So kind of in that supportive mindset, like, I think we all kind of do it a little bit anyway, that when we do feedback, we're kind of doing as Lucy quotes it, she's not here, I'll quote her, shit sandwich. So we've got our kind of positive, and then our negative, and then our positive again, to kind of make sure we're building them up, but we're still growing and learning and things like that. There's also kind of similarly promotes the effects of improvement, encouraging students to persist and achieve more. So we don't give up, we keep going, like that kind of, we're never done. We can always improve. What can I learn next? How can I improve it? So that the kids aren't like, you get it sometimes. I don't have it so much now, but when kids are doing work and they're like, well, I've done it. I've ticked everything off, but how could you improve it? What else can you add? Is that everything? Is that going to get you the best mark? And some kids will be like, I have had that bit where they're like, well, that's probably enough to get me a 4 or 5, and that's all I want. I'm not worried. And it's like, no, like that's low bar. We are aiming higher than that. Like, what can you add to it? Because you can easily get the next grade. And like, I'm not fast. It's like, no, but you could if you were fast. And they're like, and then suddenly it's like the next lesson, like, okay, so what do I need to do for that next grade, miss? And sometimes it will take them a little bit to sit and digest, but actually kind of having that belief for them and be like, no, we are going another level. So it's important to kind of have that in there. So that persistent, I think persistent is a key word here, that you never stop. You are persistent with the kids, with those expectations, but also the kid learns to be persistent and never give up. Because I think at that age, you don't necessarily know that you have to do that hard work happens. Like I said, it happens when you don't give up and you keep going and you power through, regardless of everything else that's happening in the world at the time. And then it's also that resilience and perseverance. So when students believe that their abilities can grow and receive positive reinforcement from their teachers, they are more likely to persevere and challenge through their setbacks. And I think that's it. Students, especially like our difficult students that might have a difficult home life, they don't have anybody cheering them on. They don't have anybody saying that they can do this. All they're getting is kicked out of lessons and hearing that they can't do it, that they're not going to, oh, here we go again. Oh, you back. Like, they have low opinion of themselves because that is the opinion that everyone else has projected on them. And actually we need to kind of like that bias, kind of reset it every time, have those new expectations, and really reinforce the fact that we persevere and you can achieve and everybody can achieve. And I do think, I'll come to that one in a minute. That Rita, I'm finding it now before I forget. Rita Pearson, who did that TEDx talk like forever ago, I love her quote: "Every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists they become the best that they can possibly be." And I think that's so important, that every kid has that teacher. And I don't care if as a kid that I don't really click with, they're not doing really well with my subject and I'm not the subject for them, I do struggle with that. But actually, I kind of almost make it a bit of a mission that I go and find out who, I talk about them in the staff room and see whether there's any other subjects that actually they're all right with, because I feel a little bit happier myself knowing that there's somebody, there's a place for that child, if that makes sense. Like, I think it's important that every child has a different teacher, that every child can kind of find that place to click and find that safe space that they can excel and thrive in, and that teacher that they connect with, that believes in them and believes they can do what they can do. And we can all see different things in different kids because we all have different relationships with different kids. And I think that's really important that we have that, and we have those kids have those relationships, because a lot of those, especially the difficult kids, they've probably not got those relationships at home of somebody going, yeah, actually you could be whatever you want to be. You could travel the world as a journalist, you could go and learn medicine and become a nurse, you could really be the most amazing singer songwriter and go on to perform. I love talking to like other things, like hearing about kids in different departments and like, oh my god, have you heard that kid sing? Or like, that kid's really shy, I wasn't expecting them to be able to get up and sing a solo. Like, it's finding those kids in those niche and knowing that there's a kid that a teacher that will champion that kid. And I feel like it really breaks my heart to think that there might be kids in a school that don't have that. So I think it's important that we make sure that they do, like every kid does. I've got one kid at the moment that barely speaks, won't even say her name on the register, but I make sure I go and say hello to her as I walk past her, make sure I always comment, and I'm really cheerful, even though she will never say anything back. But even to the point where she then came and stood up with me at sports day because I was the person that she wanted to stand with. And it's like those little things that I know sometimes we don't get it back, and that can make it difficult to keep being persistent, but actually we can make a difference, and kind of really thinking about that. So it's really important that we still do that and think about those, and think about how we can kind of improve that. And I think it goes into teacher training as well. So educators have been trained to adopt a growth mindset for understanding and ensuring they set high expectations for all students necessarily for them to succeed. But I also think that's like, sometimes we can come into teaching and have such high expectations of ourselves that it makes it really hard to reach. And sometimes it is a case of lowering those expectations as when you're a trainee and thinking about, right, how do I do? I always talk about this one. I think it was Brian Walton I had on. He said, we don't have to do everything at level 11. You can do level 6 and do it really well and have like a very similar outcome, rather than doing 11 all the time and then burning out. So it's making sure, again, like I think we are human and sharing that we're human. And that's actually one of the things that it mentions, like if the kids kind of can understand and see that we make mistakes, we're perfectly human, and that's okay. And that's one of those things I said previously about that I have had it before, because obviously I'm dyslexic, where I have written things wrong or spelt things wrong and the kids have pointed it out, and I will purposely go, oh yeah, no, I'm dyslexic, and make it a thing and make it part of it. We had a secret dyslexia society at my old school where even the English teacher and the science teacher were both dyslexic as well, and kind of discussed that and talked about how actually it's our superpower. Like I'm super creative, I can problem solve like no other, and actually making them realize that actually these things, they're barriers, but we can overcome them and they can be strengths. And that's kind of a bit of that growth mindset coming in there. So I just think that we need to make sure that those expectations are kind of changed. Like somebody with dyslexia might automatically go, well, I'm going to be rubbish at English. I can't spell, I can't do it. And actually, like, and I especially loved Eloise. She came and spoke on one of my very early shows with Teaching with Dyslexia. So if you're interested, do go back and have a look at that one, or listen to, I should say, back in the day. And we talked about kind of our own fears of being put in the spot and things, but actually that expectation of when the kids go, oh, I can't write, I'm dyslexic, and then she's like, well, so am I, and I'll do that as well. I was like, yeah, I am, and here's my writing frame. I've written it as a dyslexic friendly person. Like, this is how I would write something constructively, and I've broken it down in steps. And I've had a kid go, oh, but I'm well dyslexic, and then she's read that and done it. She's gone, that's the best and quickest bit of writing I've ever done in my life, miss. She's like, I love that writing frame. That's amazing. And I think sometimes it's kind of realizing that they can get over those barriers and realizing they can do it. But again, the outcome of doing all these things is to have improved performance, increased confidence, and positive attitude. And I think that's it, that the kids can build a more positive attitude if they can realize that they succeed. Oh, I've got JBL. This sounds. I've just read the first line. I'm gone. Oh my god, JBL. So I had a car crash first year of teaching, but I got very good at not repeating the same mistakes. I kept a journal of mistakes and corrections, and I think that's the thing. Like, and I also like we were talking about kind of diversity and inclusion last week. No child and no class is the same. So making sure you can adapt and change and think about each class separately is I never teach the same thing twice. I'm teaching this schemes of work that I wrote 10 years ago. I'm still teaching, but I change and adapt all the lessons every time. Like I never teach it. I'm growing as a teacher still now, all these decades in, I'm still growing as a teacher and still changing. And again, I think that's something we need to reiterate to children. Like you are not the finished product. You are never going to be perfect and everything is going to be sparkly and done. You're always going to be growing, and it's just growing into the type of person that you want to be and realizing what that is. And so one of the ways the different ways to cultivate growth mindset, I said, there's a lot more than one. So we've got normalizing struggle. So emphasize the learning project, reinforce the ideas that struggle is a natural part of learning. This helps students react positively when they encounter challenges and celebrate effort. So praise students for their effort and perseverance rather than just their achievements. And I really like that concept. So making sure we're really praising kids for what they've done as opposed to the level that they've done it at, like making sure like, oh my gosh, I've written like that comparison is really, really great. I love how you've written that, how you've described that. Oh my gosh, that's exactly how I would have described it. It's quite often the one that I use, especially when we're describing how art makes them feel. I'm like, oh my gosh, I love that. That's how I would have written it. It kind of can boost them up that way, and just like, but also being that normalizing the struggle and that kind of, it's not normal to just be able to naturally do everything. And I think, again, I feel like social media's got a lot to pay for, but they are in a society where everything looks really quick and really easy and really seamless and really perfect. And actually, that's not reality. And actually, there's a lot of hard work and graft that goes to those points. But otherwise, we've got encouraging engagement with challenges. So provide challenging tasks, offer tasks that push students out of their comfort zones. This encourages them to embrace challenge and develop problem-solving skills. So I love a bit of challenge. I always have a challenge at the end of every kind of most of my classes. Like, right, if you've done all this, now do this. Now, what do you think about this? Can you now compare? Which would you rather? I had a great one the other day where we looked at Damien Hirst's Wreck of the Treasures of the Wreck of the Unbelievable, where he basically made treasures and put them underwater and pretended to find them and pretended that they were thousands of years old to get money, versus Jason DeCarius Taylor, who creates artificial reefs to protect it. And the debate that went on and analysing that artwork was really good, but at the end it was like, right, okay, so now I want you to decide which artist do you prefer. They'd all go for the good one, and like, right, okay, so if you were now designing your own cause, what cause would you pick? What is close to your heart? What would you want to make art about that would make other people think about it? And then I was like, right, but then which one would you do? How would you do that? And then suddenly they're like, do the attention-seeking one that makes loads of money, because that would actually give money for my cause. So that would be okay if I did it that way, and kind of changing their learning and flipping. I was like, but actually there's no right or wrong. They could all say whatever they wanted. And I think that it goes back to what Dan was saying about creating that safe space where it's okay to get things wrong and there's no fear. So in my lessons, there's very much no fear in saying what you're thinking. They know that they're allowed to say whatever they want, and they know I'm going to flip it and give them a difficult question and make them change their mind. And I think that as a society is also one of those, we don't have to die on our morals, on like with our, right, this is what it is, and it's not, no one's going to change my mind. It is going to be this always. I'm always going to believe in this. Actually, you can change your mind about different things and people, and that is life. Quite often you won't have the same friends that you have in school. That's normal to outgrow and change people and have different hobbies and change friendship groups, things like that. Like that is kind of quite a normal one. And this is I'm a bit of a geek like this one. Use the word yet. So when students say they can't do something, add yet to the end of their sentence. This simple word can shift their mindset from fixed to growth. Like I said, when I changed to my old school, when I first started there, and I can't draw, I'm like, yet. You can't draw yet. I can't do this yet. I can't paint yet. And it's like, I haven't said it for as much for a while, but I certainly had a good couple of years where I literally said yeah to a majority of them, and to the point where the kids would mimic me. So if the kid said, "Oh, I can't do this," and the other kids would go, "Yet," and like, so it got to that point in my classes that they were kind of used to me saying that, and that became everybody's mindset. Everyone in the class started saying it. That's just kind of became their norm because I said it so often. I do think reiteration has a lot to pay for, if you need it to. Model a growth mindset. So share personal experiences. Teachers can share their own experiences of overcoming challenges and learning from mistakes. This demonstrates that growth is a continuous process, and using that growth mindset language can help. So I can improve with practice, or mistakes help me learn. And it's that kind of thing, like when I spell something wrong or I write something wrong, and I'll be like, "Oh, I won't forget to do that next time. Thank you for pointing it out." Kind of. And then it's like, oh, I will openly be going like, "Oh, I need a bit more practice." Or when I am drawing, like, I'm really not happy that bit's gone wrong, but I know that this will get better. I know if I trust the process, my drawing will improve. They were like, I hate it, it doesn't look right. I was like, so does mine. Mine does not look right. Especially drawing noses. And I would openly tell them, like, for my GCSE, I had to pick a project for my art where I had to pick problem solving, and I picked drawing noses because I couldn't draw a nose, and I drew thousands of noses and I still can't draw noses, but it's getting better and I can do it, and I have to trust the process, because I find it really frustrating drawing a nose because at the start it doesn't look right and eventually it will, and I just need to keep going. So and JBL's agreed with me. So I used the line on my business card, "One small word changed my life. I can't do this yet." I love that. And I just think it is kids just, everything's instant, isn't it? They need to be able to do it now. And actually, no, you just need to persevere and build a bit of resilience, and you should be able to do this. So what else we got? Teach about the brain. So obviously, I always talk about this, like adding theory to back up your concept, and getting them to understand why they need to do it. So brain plasticity. So educate students about how the brain grows and changes with effort and learning. Understanding brain plasticity can motivate students to put in the effort. So growth mindset lessons incorporate lessons that specifically teach principles of a growth mindset and how it applies to their learning. So getting them to understand how our brain works and why it works the way it does, and how this kind of repetition and being positive can actually change kind of the way we learn, is really important. Like kind of understanding of what we're doing. Set achievable goals. So goal setting helps students to set realistic and achievable goals, break down larger tasks into smaller manageable steps to make progress more visible. Reflect on progress. So regularly review and reflect on your goals with students to celebrate progress and adjust strategies as needed. And I think that's why I always say to the kids that I think this is one of the best things about art, and why actually that, like the Cultural Learning Alliance say that doing art improves a student's mental health by like 35%. And it's because quite often when you get to GCSE, you're like almost journaling. So you get 25% of your marks for your drawing and annotations. But the recording part is that you are reflecting, you're saying what went well, what didn't, and what would you change? And it's that kind of constant reflection. I feel like that's now like a big thing now, isn't it? For adults, like journaling and being reflective and appreciative and understanding and breaking down what worked and what didn't is such an important skill in terms of reflecting, because quite often especially when lots of things go wrong or big things go wrong, actually being able to take a step back and go, okay, that didn't work, that did, now I know what to do differently, is actually a really good skill to have, and to learn about how to do that is kind of that. And there's lots of, I really like the pictures of kind of like somebody kind of trying to climb something that's really high and actually they can't make it, but actually if they carved it in and broke it down into little steps, then it's far more achievable. And it's like, don't look at the end and where you're going. Or was it the mole and the horse? But it's like, the forest is too thick, I can't see where I need to go, I'll get lost. It's like, no, just look at your feet, one foot in front of the other, and you'll make it to the other side. That kind of concept of just taking it one step at a time, breaking it down into smaller tasks, and celebrating each of those steps forward, celebrating each of those achievements until you get to the bigger end goal, will break it down and stop it being so daunting. Focus on effort and strategy. So give feedback to highlight the efforts and strategies used rather than the outcome, which I kind of mentioned, and teach students to assess their own work, identify areas for improvement, foster independence and growth mindset. So I do that quite a lot with my So obviously I have my success criteria challenge. Then I give them success criteria and I mark it. Then I give them the same success criteria on the next bit and they mark it. And then they on somebody else's, and then the third time they mark their own. So they kind of get used to this kind of success criteria of what I expect them to be able to do. And that same reiteration of similarities in language, if you can keep the same thing, I keep the whole thing quite often similar through the whole of Key Stage 3, then they're really kind of are built in that they know what I'm looking for, they know what's coming. Can they still kind of achieve it? And quite often not. There's a couple of like ones that I can twist and always make sure they haven't done that quite enough. So there's always that challenge aspect that I spoke about earlier, that need to make sure that we're always challenging them and always making, whether that be challenging the language they're using, challenging their thinking, challenging the way that they flipping it and thinking it in a different way. Create a supportive classroom environment. So foster an inclusive environment where all students feel valued and supported, encouraging collaboration and peer support. And I love that. I have quite often in my photography, I mark them and I color code the marking. So red, they haven't done it. Amber is started but not complete. Green is complete. And then purple is really great, exceptional. They got house points. And I put it up. And when the kids see it, they all desperately want to change theirs to green. So it's this motivation. But there's this really great thing. The kids with purples and greens, the greens want to turn them into purples. So they go and see the purples. The purples help the red, ambers and greens, trying to get them to help them get to that. And it's like this really big collaborative process of how we can all improve together. And I think it's that kind of also kind of I did this a lot in my old school, bulletin boards and posters and display growth mindset and student achievements. So that constant visual reminder of what top level expectations are. So celebrate the successes on your school boards or school digital boards, postcards home and celebrate them. And like I've had kids get postcards and put them on the fridge and they loved it, and they're so, miss, I got one in the post, it's amazing. So celebrate them. Also that whole in my previous school I had a department Instagram, and I quite often put the like a picture of the week on there, and all the kids would want to know who it was going to be or look at each other's work and see what was being celebrated. And I think if you can show them what that top level is, what that expectation is, what that amazing work is, and then just make that the norm, that we expect everyone to be that. And incorporate growth mindset activities. So encourage games that promote good mindset, problem solving skills, group projects, resilient building exercises. So and encouraging students to keep journals where they reflect on their learning experience, challenges, and progress. So that's, I think this should be added into this is my tip going forward. I think that every student planner needs a little journal section in it. And that's something I'm going to work. I'm going to just, you watch this space, I'm going to bring one out and make sure that I think kids should learn to do it. I just think it's a skill that all kids should have, and actually being reflective and journaling. What went well this week? What didn't go well? How did I achieve? How did I survive? What did I do to get myself through this week? I think we all need a bit of that. Teachers and teach trainees, maybe you want to do that with one of your trainees. If you're a teacher, get them to reflect what went really well this week, what went badly, and how did they survive and get through it, and what kind of positives can they take from it, and what learning can they take from how they got through the week. But I thought for the last 10 minutes, I've got some, see whether my voice the last 10 minutes, that is. Oh yeah, and JBL's agreed. ECT should do the same. It changed my entire career. I do genuinely think it should be something that it should be more reflective, rather than it be like kind of like, oh, I should have got to use this pedagogy. But it should be your whole work balance. Like, how many hours did you spend on something? Was that worth reflecting on that? Did you actually put enough hours into that it was worth that lesson? Did you get out of it what you put into it? Because I think clocking that early on in your career and realizing, actually, I think I've talked about this, and I can't remember the name of it. It's from the book 4,000 Weeks, the number of weeks we're alive. Talks about how if you give yourself 2 hours to do something, it's going to take 2 hours. You could give yourself 1 hour to do the same task and you take 1 hour. Especially as teachers, we're striving for perfection. We're never going to make it to perfect. So just make sure you are not burning yourself out and putting too much in. Work out what level of effort creates a low level of effort that creates the most amazing lessons. Once you crack that, then you're in for a treat, really, with teaching. That's how you survive for decades. But yeah, so these are some encouraging kind of growth mindset examples in terms of language that you can use, because I like my yet, but I wanted to know a few more. Obviously, there's the obvious ones like, I can see you working really hard on this, great effort. Mistakes are part of learning, we can learn from this one. You haven't mastered this yet, but with practice you'll improve. Let's try a different strategy and see how it works. And that can go for your whole lesson. Emphasizing and flipping it. We were talking about this actually in our head of departments meeting, actually kind of emphasizing the learning process and flipping the learning on the kids. So what steps did you take to solve this problem? So that they're kind of thinking about the process that they've used and how they managed to get to that answer, and then maybe I'll try applying it to a more difficult question. It's not about the best, it's about getting better each day. So beating yesterday. The only person, there's all the social media, wasn't it? The only person you're competing against is yourself. The only person you're competing against is you yesterday. One of those, like you could become one of those teach, eat, pray, poster type teachers if you wanted to with this very easily. How did you approach this task? Would you do it differently next time? I think again, a nice reflective, maybe these should be in your plenaries, kind of getting the kids to actually think about their learning, and would they have done it the same way, or would they, especially like when you hit year 11, did they pick the right method to answer that exam question, or would they have changed it? So if you've got your mocks coming up and you're reviewing your mock papers, maybe actually adding in some of this questioning could help. I mean, there is the cheesy ones. Every challenge you face is an opportunity to grow. I should voice clip some of these out after, just you wait. When you find something difficult, it means your brain is growing. Keep going. Every effort you make brings you closer to your goals. What other strategies can you try to solve this problem? Challenges are opportunities to learn and improve. I believe you get better with practice and effort. Remember, every expert was once a beginner. Love that one. What do you learn from this experience? How can you apply what you've learned to future tasks? So getting them to the students to be quite reflective, I think is important. And these are like my bad to good phrases. So I've got learning a new skill. So before, I'm just not good at maths. And how many times have we heard that? We've heard it loads. So after, I can improve my math skills with practice and effort. So you get them to kind of flip it. Like if you hear it say, like call them out, make them change it. This is too hard. I can't do it. This is challenging, but I can learn how to do it. Like get them, or you say that to them. This is challenging, but you can learn how to do it. I failed, so I'm not good at this. Or making them think, I made a mistake, but I can learn from it and do better next time. Criticism means I'm not good enough, but feedback helps me understand how I can improve. New opportunities. I'm not talented enough to try this. I might not be good at this yet, but I can get better with effort. I think that's one, like a lot of kids I find these days just don't want to try something new because they're worried about failing. Like create that space where they can do it. Or they don't want to step up. They quite like to be in the crowd. So maybe I'm not a natural leader. Instead, I can develop my leadership skills over time. Problem solving. I can't solve this problem. It's too complicated. Or I can break this problem down into smaller steps and figure it out. So I think you can, it's getting them to think about what they can do, getting them to rephrase it, maybe phrase it back to them in terms of how they're thinking about what they're doing and how they're learning. And I think it's just something that we can do to really change the way students learn and the way they think about themselves. Because I think some of them, and especially teenagers with all those hormones kick in, they can think quite negatively about themselves and think that they really can't do it. And especially like those kids, we are getting up to that year 11 mock kind of period and window, and some of them will crash and burn in that. Some of them will really struggle with that concept, and then that anxiety becomes so big that they can't go into the room. And some kids, it might be that actually just going and sitting the exam and being in that environment is the positive thing that they did, but it's building it up. And I had 2 kids when I started my school that weren't attending school, couldn't get in. School were talking about sending examiners home for them to do it at home, but they both did art, and they came in for a meeting. I was like, right, let's chat this through. So we're at a critical point. We've either got to push forward and do this, or we pull you out of the course. And I was like, right, if you go do these and then come back next week and then we'll have another chat. And came back and I was like, right, week after, my room's free. Why don't we go into school and do this? You've got to put your uniform on, but it'll just be me and you. We'll just do some fun things. We'll do it on the topic that you've chosen. And they're like, okay. And parents are like, there's absolutely zero way they're coming in school uniform and going into that school. They haven't been in for months. Like, it's not happening. Came in they came. And it's like, oh, you can do, literally that positive, you can do this. At no point did I tell them they couldn't. I was like, and the whole way, I'm really proud of you. I'm so glad you're doing this. What else can we do? How else can we push this? What else can we do next? What do you want to do? What do you input it in them? What do you want to do? What do you find interesting? What can you try now and make it exciting and a place that they want to be in? And they grew and they came in and they ended up coming in and sitting all their exams in school, did their English speaking exam with me because they felt so comfortable they could do that. And it just flipped and changed their mindset. And they were like, literally, I've got some beautiful letters from them going, I didn't think I could do this. And actually you believed in me and I could. And that my challenge is that thing, what you go through does not define you. We all have challenges at different people. We are all human. And sometimes we forget that these kids are just little humans, they're little us. Some of them have got really hard lives that are going through lots of different stuff. And that doesn't excuse their behavior, but also they don't have the right mindset to get through that behavior. And actually that whole, I very much this too shall pass is very much a thing. And at that age, they don't realize that it will pass. They've never been through anything. They think that this is the end. This is hard and tough. And this is all that life is. And actually making them realize that you can get through it. And I'm throwing out the cheesy quotes tonight, but my favorite is that you can't control what happens to you. You can only control how you react to it. And actually getting students to have that mindset and be able to think, right, I might not be able to do it, but I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to keep asking questions until I get it. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to try. And even if I get it wrong, I know that Sir or Miss will support me because it's okay to fail in their classroom. It's okay to get things wrong. It's not okay to not try. That is very much in my classroom. You are not allowed to not give it a go. You have to keep going. You have to try. Not trying at all, then I lose my rag. Then you're in trouble. But as long as you're giving it a go, then how can you be cross at a kid if they're trying? They've just got to keep building, keep going, building that resilience, never give up, and they will get there. And having that expectations that they don't give up and they keep going and they keep following that success criteria. You keep building them up with that language, keep praising them and build them up, then they can get there. And that's the thing. That is the power of teacher expectations, that we can make them kind of really raise themselves and have a real positive experience and have a positive effect on our students and their outcomes. And more importantly, make them better people to go off into the wider world thereafter. And I've been rabbiting on for far too long. I've just about held my voice. So thank you guys for listening and staying with me tonight. But like I said, like there's a couple of books I mentioned tonight over from John Catt Educational, and there are some great books on this kind of growth mindset and ideas behind it over on their website. So do go and pop over. So obviously tonight is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational Publishers, a professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. So level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. And don't forget, you can use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. So if today's tickled your fancy, go and pop over there, use that code and go and find yourself a growth mindset book and find out how to raise the expectations of your students and make them into little better human beings. And be kind to yourselves as well. Those of you still got a couple more days to go, hang in there. For those of you already off, enjoy the rest of your half term. And hopefully me and Lucy will be back soon when she's feeling a little bit better. So enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.
Outstanding and world-class vision, world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.